Hey, Cedar Creek, happy 29th anniversary. Yeah, that's right. Isn't that cool? 29 years. And actually, in about a week, it'll be 9 years that I've been the lead pastor, which is really hard to believe. Which kind of goes in line with our series. For some people, it's the most disappointing series ever. And I'm excited to disappoint people again this weekend. We'll tell you the story when you show up. But this past week, we had staff meeting. Thanks for all the golden microphone stories. I love taking notes and sharing those stories with a couple of the different groups and the board. I pass many of them on to the board of Cedar Creek and just celebrate what God's doing through you and the people of our church. It is so awesome. During staff meeting, I talked about the Gap and the Gain, the Tom Sullivan book, and that framework that I think helps us understand how to frame our goals, the picture that we have of our ideal, where we are, where we've been, because how you see yourself will shape how you live, and how we view our beliefs will shape not just our behavior, but our experiences emotionally, mentally, relationally with the people around us. I mean, Romans 12, 1 and 2 talks about this. Don't be conformed the patterns of this world, but be renewed in your mind. Like, let God change the way that you think. And so, as leaders and as humans, probably in general, we're not where we want to be. We feel like we're not where we should be oftentimes, and then we get stuck in some patterns of thought that aren't helpful. And so I included an attachment, a picture of the gap thinking versus gain thinking. Gap thinking is when you compare where you are with your ideal down the road, and it's like you never measure up. You're never where you should be. So you can make progress today, but you're not where you should be. You're not at that ideal, and so here we go. Just got work to do, right? And so celebrate progress really captures that gain thinking, which keeps your ideal, looks at where you are, and evaluates the progress that you've made to where you're at, and kind of measures that. Not because our ideal doesn't matter, but because you're celebrating the progress that you've made, which means you have to hopefully have made some progress in your life. Now, a third thought that I think some people get all caught up in, if they stay too long in measuring the gap, is they get involved in what I would call give up thinking. It's just give up measuring, give up. It's like God's grace extends to everybody, and he's just comfortable with where you are. He is. Yes, that is true, but God also invites us to grow with him. And so how do we grow without getting buried under the should, the shoulding on yourself that sometimes we do? So let's just kind of review that again. Gap thinking undervalues progress and overemphasizes the gap between where you are and where you should be, where you are and the ideal. Give up thinking undervalues progress and ideal and just is like settling with where you are. And that's not really healthy either. But gain thinking, allowing your brain to measure the gain, is paying attention to where you were, to where you are today, in light of the ideal that you're chasing. I'll give you an example. I use this as staff meeting. We at Cedar Creek are not yet back to our pre-COVID physical attendance numbers. Maybe that's a surprise to some of you. But that's actually for a couple of reasons. Number one, COVID was hard, period. And number two, we actually had more services. You may or may not remember that, but we had 4, and I think we had them at a lot of our locations. And so not only did we have more services each weekend, some of our locations had more than they have today. And so just by merely adding some services, we would probably be back to pre-COVID, but we haven't done that yet. And so here's an example. Gap thinking would be frustration, failure, disappointment, discouragement that we're not back to pre-COVID numbers. We're not there yet. Gap thinking may cause us to do desperate things to try to get back to those numbers quicker than we have the staffing, structure, and resources to do that. Okay? Gap thinking. Give up thinking is to stop measure altogether. Numbers don't really matter. It's like you swing the pendulum in the other direction, but gain thinking celebrates growth. And so let me put this in like a modern context. Recently, we were just featured in Outreach Magazine as one of the top 100 fastest growing churches 2 years in a row. Gap thinking would look at that list and be like, yeah, but we're not back to pre-COVID numbers. And so you stay frustrated about where you are instead of measuring the gain. Like, we're experiencing growth and momentum in the right direction. Give up thinking would be like to not even look at it, not talk about it, not celebrate it. And that's not helpful either. So let's make sure that as we step into the fall, we continue to lean into measuring the gain, not just in our lives and in our ministry, but in the people around us. Let's keep the ideal, the calling that God has for all of us, to reach the whole world for Christ, to love God and love others with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. But let's keep measuring the gain that we are making and not just the gap of where we are versus where we should be. And I think as we do that, it'll change how we feel. And yes, I have to reframe and come back to measuring the gain. It'll change how we relate to each other. But I actually think it'll build momentum in a way that just looking at the gap doesn't. So that's my encouragement to you. That's what we talked about on Tuesday. I wanted to get it on video so that you could refresh and remember it. And again, this will probably be fleshed out in some more in-depth ways in the January series that I can't wait to step into with all of you after Christmas. Love you guys. See you this weekend.